you up to run for council? Is this your version of Brock on the block?
No. Although I suppose
should
that
be.
wouldn't be. I suppose it wouldn't be a bad idea. I'm not sure if I want to do that. I've thrown my name in.
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
I play, but but I'm not sure. Especially now with the baby and Beautify, that I'm like ready to.
Yeah, it's a big energy suck.
It's a lot. So if I was chosen, I would consider doing it. I think this is my way of actually contributing to the community that lets other people shine.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to go to board meetings and commission meetings on their schedule, but I can do it according to mine in this period of time.
Yeah, and you don't have to read a manifesto of staff reports every week. And
It's like, it's the most creative thing that I thought I could do to. I don't think people in community, especially ours, get enough praise for their good work.
mm-hmm. I agree.
Just like we started this with, right?
We don't celebrate our successes enough. It's on to the next crisis. So if something happens that's good, it's sort of a tick the box. Okay, that went well, and then you go on to the next crisis. And as a leader of a team, it's always important to take those moments and celebrate with the community that created such a special event or program. It needs to happen.
Yeah, and we don't do it nearly enough. So I think this is part of that act of celebration. It's an act of getting the good word, the good gospel of good people, of what they stand for and why they do what they do, and bringing humanity to a very polarized space.
Yeah.
So a lot of this was also came from my. I don't know if I wrote after my presidency with Ocean Park Association. I wrote this sort of a dissertation, if you will, on what I saw the issue was around us and them. And I published it in the Daily Press.
Oh, I didn't see it. I'll look it up.
It's on my LinkedIn
Okay.
thing too, and it was called "Us and Them: Destroying the Us and Them Mentality: A Guide to Civic Discourse." And I just really realizing that so many adults still act like children, I think, is what I found.
Well, right. A lot of the things that happen you would not allow your child to do in school.
Ever.
100%.
Basic courtesies and common sense and things that I think we just lost.
And mutual respect.
That's right.
Just respect as a person, respect as someone who has views that are similar to yours or different than yours. It's so important because I've worked for boards for a long time. Very few of the boards are rubber stamp boards. People accuse organizations of that, but it's not true because there's always diverse opinions around the table. And if you take a moment to listen to them and listen to each other, in the end, the result is usually substantially better than what you went in thinking in the first place.
With less angry people and with some empathy and with better solutions, like you're saying. I couldn't agree more. I don't know. I guess it's finding those points where you see things downward spiral, to step back and get people in a mindset that they're willing to, I don't know, breathe for a second. Look at the individual as a person and not as an enemy. There's this instant attack thing. Like if you like somebody that I don't like, or you believe in a policy that I don't believe in, that you automatically you must be a soulless, villain.
Yeah. Early in my career, early in this job, within the first couple of years of being here, I presented a staff report to my board of directors. I don't even remember what the topic was. And as staff, I believe it's my job to give the board all the information they need in order to make a good decision, and also to give a recommendation. So I did that. I presented, and I felt very confident about it. I felt like this was a no-brainer. There shouldn't have been any controversy. Well, the whole conversation went sideways. It was amazing. I just watched it spiral into something that it wasn't meant to be. And as they were having this conversation and voices got raised and became very dramatic, I had this aha moment. And it was like, this isn't about you and your ego, Kathleen. This is about what's best for the organization. You did your best work, and it's their job to give feedback and change it and alter it. And you need to step away from that and embrace that change. And as soon as I did that, just, I was young. I was, in my mid-30s, and it was just, okay, this is the real job. This is it. And so many people bring their ego to the table now, and they're not allowed, I don't know, it prohibits people from hearing each other, I think.
I agree. I think, and hearing, I'll take one step farther and say active listening.
Mm-hmm.
Which, with so much discourse on social media, I think it actually has reduced the amount of active listening that people even had before, which I think was limited. But now with such quick interactions and everything is typing, and a lot of their ways of contributing information to the conversation is on social media, you end up with a typing quick, everything that I have to say can be spoken at the moment I need to say it, because that's what we're allowed to do now when it's in a thread on a group or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing that the pandemic has helped foster, unfortunately, these Zoom meetings, we even recognize in our own organization that there's a distance between you and the people you're meeting with when you're on Zoom. And obviously we did out of necessity, just like everybody else. But there's a huge difference in you and I talking on the phone or via Zoom versus like this.
Huge.
You read people's body language. It's easier to be empathetic or sympathetic. And there's some chatter, just some casual chatter. How's the baby, Evan? Right. And you tell me you have a terabyte of photos already. The baby's only a month old. That we lost that for 2 years, and I think we're all suffering because of it.
I think so.
The world has become so narcissistic. And, we're in a world of grievance politics now, nationally anyway.
Yeah.
But that's trickled down here. And it hasn't been a positive thing. I think we're all ready to emerge from that.
This year?
I think so.
2022?
2022, for me, it's a huge year of change.
Yeah.
Which is exciting and refreshing. And but I think for a lot of people, we're not emerging. We're not at an endemic, right? COVID's not ending. But now, a year ago, you and I wouldn't have sat here and had a conversation face to face.
Right.
But now we can.
Right.
And so we need to take those opportunities to be together again.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how things come back, and hopefully they do.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we're at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard from various sources that lead me to think that perhaps the milder version of this virus is actually the one that's going to end it.
Uh-huh. Well, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that. But, it's like the flu. We get flu shots every year.
Yeah.
I think it's going to get into that at some point.
It'll be as considered to something to that degree,
mm-hmm.
hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see how 2022 pans out. But you, in 2022, have a whole new journey ahead of you.
A whole new journey, Evan.
A whole new journey. Can you give me a brief recap of your experience the last 25 years here?
You want the Reader's Digest version?
Well,
that makes sense.
Whatever you think is worth.
Well,
25 years is tough to narrate the whole way through. That's like a Lord of the Rings sort of.
Exactly. I think we have. Let me just sort of start over. So the past 25 years it's been my absolute privilege to serve this community. It's not just a job. This has been a passion. I consider downtown Santa Monica my life's work. And, I grew up with the place. I told you I started young. I was in my mid-30s. And when I was hired, the board and the city leaders at the time who made the hiring decision said, the 3rd Street Promenade is done. We did the capital improvement. All you need to do is market it. And so for the first several years, that's what I did. I marketed, we did filming, promotions. Things were simpler then. It was easier to do filmings and promotions than it is now. But over the years, the 3rd Street Promenade really became, it created a sense of place in Santa Monica that didn't exist before. We had hotels, we've always had the beach, clearly, but, and we've had Main Street and Montana and Pico, which have always been centers of commerce for neighborhoods. But there was no real grand plots, no real marketplace that the community could gather around. And the success of the promenade, there's lots of heroes, there's lots of champions for the district, but we became an entertainment and dining location, and that's something that locals enjoyed and embraced, right? And despite some of the chatter that's out there, downtown Santa Monica has always had a locals first perspective, this organization. Now, all the buildings are owned by individual property owners, so who they lease to is their prerogative within the use chart. But the fact that for many years this was a place that has been eclectic and real, there's a certain amount of grit, right? We're not a sanitized Disneyland type of experience at all. And some of the biggest accomplishments is, oh my God, we finally got public restrooms.
Yeah.
Right? and so you don't think of those sort of day-to-day needs when you're just a consumer or a tourist, but in our business, it's exactly what you have to think about. So we created the Downtown Ambassador Program about 13 years ago now. That was a huge shift.
I remember when it started.
Yeah, I brought in $3.5 million of private money into the public space that has benefited everybody who lives, works, and frequents downtown Santa Monica. So the streets are impeccably clean. It's an extraordinarily safe place because I've got 100 sets of eyes and ears out there thwarting people who might be up to no good. But again, it's not a sanitized place. And that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
There's a realness to it.
I hadn't thought of it in that way before. I think that's an interesting perspective. There's a lot of those markets that feel very Pleasantville-y, right? And while it is a more of a curated space, it does have the feeling of a downtown.
Right, and we want to preserve that. Yeah. It's amazing how many different corporate entities seek to mimic a real urban area.
Right.
Right, without the urban issues.
Right.
Of graffiti or homelessness or whatever. But, all of this is part of our community, and the one thing that obviously the ambassadors have been an important part. The really fun stuff, like creating the downtown Santa Monica ice rink, was just a joy, and I did it out of kind of necessity, worried because Santa Monica Place was going to be under construction. And downtown Santa Monica has this ping pong history. So the old mall, Santa Monica Mall, was sort of destitute in the mid 80s because Santa Monica Place had sprung up in the early 80s. So it took all the retail that was on the street and brought it into the private mall. It was the 80s. Malls were the thing, right?
Right.
Indoor malls.
Oh, yeah. Walt Whitman.
Yeah.
Walt Whitman Mall in Long Island.
So was that your hangout?
Oh boy, I was there a lot.
Totally.
You dropped off at the mall. That's what you do.
That's
you walk
what you
around
do.
the mall. Yeah.
And then the Third Street Promenade had its invigoration in the late 80s. So really the quality tenants that were in Santa Monica Place moved out onto the street. And so the idea that Santa Monica Place was going to be doing this big remodel in 2008, and it was a Gensler design, and it was a lot of capital was going in there. We thought we'd have the same ping pong problem. So two things happened. We created the ambassador program to have more eyes and ears and sort of a concierge level on the street. But then while they're under construction, I thought, oh my gosh, the anchor stores are going to be closed. Remember there was a Macy's and Robinson's May there, right?
Oh, wow.
And so would you be thinking about holiday shopping that during that year in downtown Santa Monica, or would you just go somewhere else? So I pitched to the board with my friend Randy Gardner, who's an Olympian. I don't know if you know Randy in Thai Babylonia, but live here in Marina del Rey, and we're buddies. The idea of doing an ice rink, the city gave us the space once we started looking for it. And I said to the board, well, if nobody comes, if 0 people skate, if it is a total dud, we'll lose $60,000, which is a lot of money, but then it was more like, well, if you put on a big event, that's what you're going to spend. Mm-hmm. And this was I think the first time we did it for 4 or 6 weeks. It was a short window. But it was hugely successful. And I
think I've been there once per year.
Yeah, I mean, other than the last 2 years, and one due to COVID, and the second one due to electrical problems.
Yeah.
But we would have had it this year.
Hugely successful.
Yeah, and you know what's so great? It's a healthy activity. I grew up doing it, and now I feel like there's this whole generation of people who know how to skate. Mm-hmm. I mean, your little girl's going to know how to skate, and she lives in Southern California, or your child. Sorry.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in central Minnesota.
Where there's plenty of ice skating.
That's right. It's a great outdoor activity.
I'm pretty sure Minnesota is the state of 1 billion lakes.
10,000 they say, but there's more.
I was joking with 1 billion, obviously. I don't think there's that many lakes.
Yeah. But anyway, to talk about what, like 25 years in a nutshell, I would say the best part of this work has been connecting people with people. Whether that's a potential tenant with a landlord, whether it's community members together, whether it's the Pride celebration where we're bringing a whole community of people to the downtown core, Black History Month, or any of those things, making connections is what has been the most fulfilling and rewarding part of this career, without a doubt.
It's the art of gathering.
I just love it so much.
Yeah, that's great. And it's going to be hard to see you go.
Thank you.
There's many of us who are going to miss you here, but that doesn't mean your legacy has not created something wonderful.
Thank you. I think there's a really good platform. The organization is in really solid shape. It's a good time to make the move. During COVID, we established the Third Street Promenade Stabilization and Economic Vitality Plan, so there's a roadmap with whoever comes in, if they opt to take it with the board, to just really focus on, the changing retail environment, the fact that our buildings have to change the layout and the size. There's changes that have to be made in order for us to move into the next generation. But it's here and ready to go.
And is it moving forward? Is it progressing? Does it feel like it's growing?
Yeah, we've got our pedestrian counts are currently surpassing 2019 numbers. So that means we were talking about anchors earlier, and the Third Street Promenade, the open air space, is our biggest anchor.
Yeah.
In COVID.
Yeah.
And so it's drawing so many people locally and regionally, and we've had night markets and lots of outdoor events, music, wonderful holiday programming. All of that is just drawing a huge number of people every week to the promenade.
Awesome. So how have you brought all of these learnings now to the International Downtown Association, which you are the chair of, which is a wonderful organization, and thinking, I guess you could say, thinking globally, acting locally, thinking globally would apply here as well. But not only are you thinking globally, you're acting globally with these values and these all of that you've learned here, and you're putting forth in something bigger. So tell me a little bit about your role there and what you're creating for the world internationally, because that's pretty awesome.
Well, the International Downtown Association is just a wonderful group of people who do what I do, who do what we do here. And it's interesting because it's not city, although we do have some members that are city folks, and it's not private sector, even though those are our boards. It really is a combination of the two, and it's a real love of creating urban spaces that are, post our horrible George Floyd incident. The discussion at the IDA was, how do we ensure that our downtowns are remain the quintessential safe public dialogue, a space for public dialogue? How do we ensure that everybody feels comfortable demonstrating or having a counter protest? How do we ensure that those activities happen safely for everyone who wants to speak? It was an amazing time, and I think that the people that I'm surrounded with at IDA are just some of the most creative and innovative and bright, funny, just, I don't want to say woke because that word is not right, but I would say the read on the community is really strong for most people. So the power of the International Downtown Association, as you mentioned, I'm chair. I've been acknowledged by my peers to be put in that position, and I hold that position humbly and with a great deal of pride, because it really is, it's sort of the epitome of our industry. And in saying that, it's so interesting when we're talking about global actions and how it translates to local, right? And if you watch the discourse in Santa Monica amongst some of the commercial stakeholders, not residential stakeholders as much, but the commercial ones, you'd think that downtown Santa Monica had gone to hell in a handbasket, right? Yet,
depends on what media you're watching.
Right. But I have that disease too.
I didn't experience that.
You gravitate towards the negative comments. I mean, it's a terrible disease. We all need to get over that, right?
Yeah. Well, controversy and conflict performs better.
Yeah.
It has better engagement.
But
sadly,
on an international scale, on the international stage, downtown Santa Monica is the best of best practices. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. And
this organization is a leader in the industry and thought of as a really, really successful operation. This is how you should do it. And I take credit for that. I take credit for my team. I take credit for all of those things because this community, and I mean our board, our team, and our commercial stakeholders have made that happen. But the International Downtown Association they focus on everything. It can be transportation, it can be micromobility, it can be retail, it can be public space management. It's all of it. Because guess what? This doesn't happen by accident. These spaces are managed. They're just managed differently than the private sector.
Yeah. It's probably worth diving into just a little bit on micromobility,
Sure.
especially because a lot of that is my background as well. And I think it's interesting to see how different communities look at mobility, what they allow, what they don't allow, and why. There's a lot of reasons. I'm wondering how is it thought of here in Santa Monica, and how it can be helpful, and where do we need to draw the line, and also at the IDA, how is micromobility being viewed at? Is it more of an opportunity or more of a, people are leaving scooters and, where is the conversation? Do you see more of it happening? And how do we create more of an opportunity? Because it's obviously many powerful tools under this category. Right?
Well, let's look at history.
Yeah.
The automobile. When they first hit the roads, the people with the horses thought they were the worst thing in the world. They were noisy. They were all over the place. They were too fast.
They smell.
All of
There's
those
poop
things.
in the street.
Every single time something is introduced to a marketplace, there's those who say, "Hey, kid, get off the lawn," and there are those who say, "Oh my God, this is exactly the wave of the future."
Right.
What's important in this work is not building. Building is a broad term, but not building for me. We're building it for our kids. So we always have to look forward. I think we need to embrace micromobility 100%. And I think the scooter companies, the bike companies need to do more to be better partners. But I would never ever say that they should be banned or overly regulated. We have a tendency here in Santa Monica to overregulate. And I think now it seems that we've come to a little bit more of a happy medium with scooters, with our friends Bergsley being left, unfortunately, in the dust, unfortunately, in my view, because I think competition creates better.
It's interesting. They're also sort of the first here.
Yeah,
which
and
is sort of interesting to see, but separate conversation.
And what I don't like about that, frankly, is that this is a homegrown startup that just became a publicly traded company. We need to understand that we were part of their testing area, and we were part of them growing up. And so were there fits and starts, were there successes and failures, all of that. But it doesn't mean you kick out your
And Tim Harder's been so active here for so long. It was a little tricky to see. I don't know every decision point that was at that reading when they were doing the matrix of checkboxes. But I will give a quick shout out to Bird being the first double kickstand or single kick, the one that actually keeps
it goes up like a
motorcycle.
my Vespa.
Yes, which was brilliant.
Yep.
Although Spin is now doing two wheels at the front, which I saw a couple, which was interesting.
Oh.
I saw a couple of those. It was like Piaggio made those sort of like two-wheel front motorcycle.
Yep.
It was like that version. It was kind of interesting.
Did you ride it?
I haven't ridden that one yet, but I rode those when those Birds first came out. The Bird Silver, or whatever line, that Bird Platinum.
Yeah.
That was the sturdiest and probably the best operating at that time that I found. And they finally got the kickstand thing, which I feel like I was just thinking about since it came out. Like, why is someone not fixing this kickstand problem?
Right.
It seems so obvious.
Well, it's not like kickstands are a big deal. I mean, we have kickstands all over the place forever.
We know how to do it. Everyone's complaining that they're tipped over. They fall in the middle. But they're getting way better. I mean, the tracking on the sidewalks is getting better.
Yeah, and I think that I think we embrace these kinds of things. But we had an interesting thing happen during COVID. So you probably, because you're a scooter and bike rider, know that there was a protected bike lane put on Ocean Avenue.
I do.
So during COVID, we were having trouble expanding the outdoor dining along Ocean Avenue because of just the setup of it, and we needed at least 6 feet of pedestrian passage to ensure obviously ADA access and so forth. And so it was an amazing opportunity to create that protected bike lane we already had the funding for. There was grant funding for that. And then to push the dining on Ocean Avenue all the way to the curb and create those small boardwalks that allow pedestrians to comfortably pass. That required a reduction of lanes, one in each direction on Ocean Avenue. Ocean Avenue has, in my whole 25 years, been a completely underperforming street. There's good restaurants along Ocean, but it was never a place for pedestrians. It's right on the Pacific Ocean, for God's sake. Why in the world doesn't anybody walk there?
Right.
And because it was unpleasant. On the west side of the street, you had food trucks and buses and all these things that blocked the view.
Right.
And on the east side, it was a car-dominated street.
Yeah, and also sort of big hotels, and it felt like larger establishments, not necessarily small stop-and-go kind of experience.
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, the shift was completely. I told Lane when she left, because I sort of had to arm wrestle her into coming over there and helping me solve this problem, which she did, but she wasn't happy with me about it. She had very many bigger fish to fry, but I couldn't, have to do what I have to do.
Hey,
and
that's your big fish.
So
it was my big fish. And it is a big fish.
Totally changed Ocean Avenue, right?
Yeah, totally.
100%.
Yeah.
Do you know how many people want it to be reversed because they can't traverse Ocean Avenue as quickly in their car? Do you know what I say? Slow down.
Right? How many?
More than you would hope.
I have to imagine it's no more than 5% of the population. It can't be more than 5%. They're just loud.
But I think that the point is that take your family, go to dinner, or walk down there and see how it's changed. Get out of your vehicle and see how it's changed. Right. And that's kind of the mentality about micromobility, right? Change is really challenging for some folks. But after a while, you get used to it, you learn, you adapt to it. And
there's been a complacency now, I think, with scooters. I think there has been, they eliminated a handful of the big issues, I think.
Yeah.
There's still some people who, as I call it, leave their shoes in the middle of the kitchen.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I look at the scooter, I'm like, this is so obvious. This is not a scooter problem. I think there's something in the upbringing of people where they did not learn this habit where you don't leave things in the middle of like walkways. You don't put your shoes in the middle of the kitchen. You don't leave your bicycle in the middle of the living room. It's like, that's part of and I don't know how to shift that, because I think I don't know if that's an America thing, but that's a habitual thing that I think I learned as a child.
Right. So we have to do a good job with that, of teaching the next generation. It's the same for people who throw their trash on the ground.
I would imagine it's similar.
Tons of trash we pick up is ridiculous. It's like, pick up after yourself. There's a trash can every 5 feet. Yeah.
That's the first, and even in our home, it's like the first thing that says like, you must throw out your garbage. That is not a negotiable thing. You have to throw your garbage out. You don't expect anyone else to pick up your garbage.
Right.
And we teach that, I believe we should be teaching that to people even when they're out to eat. Right? If there's a trash can, don't expect that a waiter is going to come pick it up for you.
Right.
Look first to make sure that you can actually find a place to throw it out. You don't have to go back into the kitchen to put it into the the bus trays or whatever, but think about it. Don't leave a mess. Don't leave salsa all over your table. Wipe it up. Don't leave it for the waiter to clean up,
I agree. And what's so funny is that I think if we all did a little bit more of that, because that's one of the things that you'll see happens with me and my team. The other day, I was on a phone call. I was walking down the promenade, and this man was standing in the middle of the dinosaur fountain.
In the water?
In the water.
Like?
Yeah.
Was it knee-high?
Yeah, knee-high.
About knee-high? Yeah.
And so I said, I excused myself from the phone call, I thought, I'll be right back. I said, honey, you can't be in that fountain. You're going to have to come out. And so he came out. The man clearly had a, some mental issue, something. But I wasn't unkind to him.
Right.
But if we all just take a minute and say, are you okay today? Or is it, it's not okay to do that here. And we've talked about this before.
Right.
I mean, I do a lot of that
Right.
too. But if you just take a minute,
Yeah.
That's all it took.
Yeah. And kindness. Not everyone was taught the same lessons. And it's not always their fault.
Right.
It's their responsibility, but not necessarily their fault.
Mm-hmm.
And we still have to treat them like people.
100%.
It doesn't mean they're not human. And it doesn't mean that they, even realize, at the time they didn't realize it. So clearly in the case, in your example, you acted with kindness to change a situation that you thought was inappropriate. And it worked out well. And he responded with kindness.
He did.
Yeah.
I worried about him later because it was cold and he had wet feet. So I did send an ambassador looking for him to see if he needed socks. But I just feel like in this moment, this age of these, fast typewritten responses that you referred to earlier, that if we took as much time to be humane,
Yeah.
say hello, good morning, you're walking your dog, just something, just
the easiest thing you can do. Smile. And this situation always amazes me where two people can, in the same neighborhood, who are walking their dogs or whatever, or walking for coffee, will pass each other and look down. They're alone. It's just the two of them and they're passing.
Mm-hmm.
Gender agnostic.
Yeah.
Right? Or, just two individuals and you're just like, wow, how about a smile? If you lift your head up and look someone in the eye and smile and say good morning, how hard would that be to do?
Right.
And sometimes I think it's these basics that we're talking about, these basic habits, like smile and say good morning to somebody who maybe hasn't heard that in a long time.
But 100%. And even in our local politics, right? The vitriol that's spewed between people who should be respectable citizens of this community. And if I will not put any names to these, but if person A
Mm-hmm.
meets person B
Mm-hmm.
that they're in a feud with on
Housing.
Right, development, height,
Sure.
whatever, fill in the blanks, see each other in the marketplace. See, go to Vaughn's and you run into them.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think that you'd still be neighbors first.
And I think this is one of those conundrums that I guess the whole world is part of, and no one is taking that action step that I've seen. Well, I want to say there's some organizations looking to fix this, but it's at that moment where you notice either the attack, the ad hominem attack, or the vitriol in some capacity where you say, all right, let me step back and be a person first. I don't have to respond with the same level of energy or with the same emotion that was put forth towards me. I can come back with kindness. I don't have to come back with anger. I don't have to come back on public record in front of everyone to show, you're basically what you're showing as leadership is how everyone else should be.
Mm-hmm.
So you're endorsing what you're doing and acting upon, and how you're being is what you're essentially saying to the whole community. This is okay.
Right.
And that's the big issue, I think, is that now that translates into, however those conversations happen, translate into what the community now sees. Well, they do it. The leaders do it.
Yeah, so how is it fixable in Santa Monica?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways you can approach this. I think, I think Laurel Rosen, who I recently spoke with, sees it as I believe, or she believes empathy is one of the big pieces of that. I think empathy gets thrown around a lot, and I think she's right.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets thrown around a lot and I think it's become overused. Unfortunately, in people's minds, I don't think it's been overused. I think people think it's overused because they hear it a lot. But I think it's more important to dive deeper into like we're saying, this person is an individual. If I was in their shoes, I would think exactly the way they think.
One of the biggest problems now is the false information that's perpetuated. It's really challenging in my position and in any position of leadership, because our job is to always take the high road, you don't see me on social media confronting people. It's just I don't do it. Because this work is also my life, is also my work, is also my life. It's the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so always taking the high road is, maybe that's not the right phrase. Maybe it isn't taking the high road. Always deferring to the most professional position, which is non-confrontational, and sometimes restating the facts are important, but the facts are so skewed sometimes. I mean, the things that have been said about this organization over the past 2 years, so much of it just is not true. But I think about if I'm a reader,
Yeah.
and I read something that isn't true, but you think it's true because someone in leadership has put it up,
Yeah.
or someone who is a leader in the community, they don't necessarily have a position of leadership, but they're a leader in the community. You take that as fact, I'd be mad at us too.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that's the trouble, is that I think we've stopped giving people and organizations the benefit of the doubt of, this is always the way that, in 25 years I've acted, or this is always the way the organization has acted. These are the kinds of things they do. This is, and instead of saying, hey, questioning whether something that sounds outlandish is truly outlandish, you just sort of take it as gospel.
Right.
And so I've thought about this a lot. It's like there should be some fact checker mechanism that
an impartial fact checker. Because now you got fact checkers and they have their own bias.
I know,
and it's crazy.
Again, we're back to the grievance politics and not being able to trust government and all that right now. I get it, but not everybody's out to destroy the community.
And I think a lot of the people who are upset, I do think it comes down to distrust. Mm-hmm. And for those people, they are rightfully distrusting the government, I believe. Now, I don't necessarily agree with why they're not distrusting the government in all cases, but sometimes I do understand that. I don't act upon with that energy, but they're deciding to. And whether I agree with it or not, I think they have to be listened to. We have to listen and understand the why they're distrusting the government, because it's real. And as many people feel that way, whether it's local or federal, that is a real feeling at all levels of politics. And we have to be able to listen to them, understand their concerns, and make them feel better in some capacity, ameliorate their worries. They're dealing with something that is real to them. And I'm not here to say whether it is or isn't. That's the fact. Where you get your facts from is what determines.
Sure.
The word fact, I think, is the most largely misused word these days, because ask someone what's a fact. Ultimately, for me, it's objective truth. But objective truth is you can't find objective truth anywhere unless you were watching an event, and even then you're interpreting it. And then you have to explain it to someone.
Right.
There's all these levels, and then they have to interpret what you're saying, and then it's in writing on a news article. And I think this is part of the issue, is like if their facts are different, their echo chamber is different than your echo chamber. And somehow those echo chambers need to merge, and we need to listen and understand, and they all have to have merit. Even if we don't like it, we have to give them merit so that we can acknowledge their feelings, have empathy, and say, yes, what you're saying is real and it's legitimate, and let's fix that perception, because perception is reality.
Yeah. Well, it's like the dinners the human, what's it called? Human Resource Council? No.
The
Relations,
HRC?
yeah, Human Relations Council was trying to, sorry.
The HRC, of course.
What they were trying to do is having these community dinners, right, to get people engaged in public dialogue. And one of the things that I always wanted to do, but I haven't been able to do here in downtown Santa Monica yet, I'm so close getting through the city red tape. But after Wednesday's farmers market, I want to keep the street closed and do one long community table right down Arizona Avenue, have the local restaurants participate, do fresh farmers market, farm to table, community dinners with music and so that it becomes a local tradition where we meet and talk and enjoy wonderful food and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. Wow,
And
a real community roundtable.
But even, one that we can bring our kids to, and there's,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just, it becomes a local tradition.
And one of the main tenets of being part of this could be some of these rules you lay out for civil discourse,
Mm-hmm.
in how to communicate and have real conversations and acknowledge people. Thank you for sharing.
Uh-huh. And potentially prompts on the table, right?
Yeah,
Conversation prompts.
I like that. What kind? Give me an example of one you have in mind.
Conversation prompt?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't thought about it, but oh gosh, what would be a good one? Let's think together.
How about that was easy button from Staples?
Yeah, that's great.
You gotta have one of those. I feel like because that's a joke button that says lighthearted humor.
Yeah.
At this moment.
Yeah. Well, I think that the more we can encourage people to meet face to face, as soon as we're out of this COVID bubble,
Yep.
that's how we will emerge as a community. And, as a community in Santa Monica, we are extraordinarily privileged and
Of the highest degree.
blessed.
Yeah.
And
No matter which side of town you live on.
no matter every side of town
Yep.
you live on. I mean, unless you're living under the pier or something,
Right.
right? But there's a place for some gratitude and
Mm-hmm.
thankfulness that we've all become a little bit callous about,
Mhm.
I think.
Yeah.
And can practice a little bit more
Yeah.
religiously.
Yeah. Another shout out to Laurel, who would very much agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
From
Yes.
we talked about that a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
there is absolutely that needs to be part of your daily practice.
Right.
And one of the things, just thinking about the solutions again to some of this, and you brought up the community table. When you meet, I think a lot of people just don't know the people. They didn't sit with them and have coffee and talk about their history, their background, where they come from, their family, their common interests. Everything, their introduction to each other starts on polarization,
Yeah, conflict, right?
on conflict.
What side are you on?
I don't know who you are, but you're on that side. You're one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
You're them. And we're us. And it's like, wow, did you know your kids went to the same college?
Right.
Did you know that they're both studying psychology? Did you know that, both of you actually go to the same gym?
Yeah.
Did you know that you both love to rollerblade? Whatever it is. But those things, and you're like, wow, we have so many common interests. This is just one stupid thing that we disagree with. And there'll be plenty more. So I think it's almost like we should force people in the community not to just go to the meeting and talk about the problems, but you have to make one friend each time.
Right. Or just bury the damn lead.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Right. Exactly. It seems also very childish, but it's like, okay, it's get to know your neighbor time.
Yeah.
10 minutes, pick a stranger.
It's your icebreaker.
This is your icebreaker, and you talk for 10 minutes and get to know your neighbor. And if everyone felt like they knew each other.
Well, and that's what happens on the promenade from time to time, especially when we're in our heyday.
Yeah.
Because people would gather around a street performer, for example. They'd share a common experience, total strangers.
Yeah.
But they had this sense of community by doing it. You were participating in something that was very special.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pride had that. for us when we did it in 2019.
Mhm.
I don't know if you were able to come down, but it was.
I was there.
It was.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, you were there. I have a
Uh-huh.
picture with you.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Yeah, that's right.
We better bury that picture. I'm kidding.
I don't know what I was wearing. I was probably wearing this.
but those kinds of events bring people together. Drag queen bingo. You know,
Yeah.
We sat around and did that with 50 people up at the gallery,
Right.
and all. Then I had 49 new friends. It was great.
And you learn about people that way.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more, traveling is another solution. You want to build empathy and gratitude and perspective. In 1 week of traveling to somewhere you haven't been, you will get more of that than maybe you've had in your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that comes from that. And go to any country that you haven't been to, any city you haven't been to, any community, and stay there for a while. Whether it's some are going to be way poorer,
Mm-hmm.
where you'll get a ton more perspective.
Right.
You go spend time in communities and see how happy they are. I remember when I was in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
I spent about a month there just riding around,
Nice.
renting, the scooters, and and I went through a handful of different cities. And what I realized was amazing. It's amazing how happy some of these people are and how much less they have than what most of America has.
Right.
And their day-to-day is seemingly joyful. At least the ones I spent time with,
Sure.
at least from the perspective that I gathered in talking to people, and you realize that the stuff, the quality of life that we think is just given to us and we must have it. This is the default, the de facto, and that's how you keep your happiness is entirely wrong, I believe.
Yeah.
Happiness has nothing to do with that.
Nope, it doesn't.
You can learn a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe you can
Bring it home.
bring it home. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you're going to Hollywood.
I am. It's time to follow my dream. I'm kidding.
You're going to bring all this goodness to a place that's probably very excited to have you.
They are very excited, and so am I. I think after 25 years, it's time for Santa Monica to have a new leader and a new voice, and I think that's very positive for the community. And again, I feel very confident in where I'm leaving this organization. But I have a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm to create wonderful places. And if you look at Hollywood right now, it's iconic, first of all, for God's sake. When I tell people in Minnesota I'm going to Hollywood, they're looking at me like, you are going where? But it has some of the best. It's got Pantages. It's got the Bull. It's got some of these amazing cultural venues.
Oh, yeah. And history.
It's got the sign.
Yeah.
Right? It's got all of that history. It's got a huge amount of capital investment going in. There's many apartment units that are going in. There's a whole opportunity of fresh investment there. But what it doesn't have is the street level experience that we have here.
Right.
Now, I'm no fool. I know that this is a big task to address some of the issues that are chronic in Hollywood, which are different in some ways than here. In some ways, they're very much the same. But every new mayoral candidate in LA is going to run on homelessness, right? Right? I mean, how can they not? LA's
feels like any candidate for anywhere in this area
has to
include that in their platform.
because it's everybody's number one issue, and
Yeah.
business and community are aligned on this issue, which is another interesting point. Typically, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That's true here in
It's
Santa
worth
Monica,
embracing that consensus too.
100% is an opportunity. So we're going in with that. So in November of 2022, we'll have a new mayor, which gives me enough time to sort of get to know the players in Hollywood. And then my job is to make the organization relevant in City Hall, and so to do what I do here, play with the big kids. And then we've got the Olympics in 2028. Which is sort of this end cap, right? If LA can't get it together between now and 2028, is it ever going to happen, Evan?
No.
No, it's not. So,
And that's a good reason to do it too.
I feel like it's just this magical time where I can go in and really focus on what I do best, which is advocacy and policy and working with the council people in that district, getting to know them. I don't have any assumptions that going into City Hall in Los Angeles is as easy as going into City Hall here.
You know, I've worked with both. You'd be surprised on which things you think are easier and harder, and how
Right.
you can build traction in which direction.
Well, it seems like you can close the street in Hollywood just like that because it's closed all the time. It's like, how does that happen? Here it's like,
that's right.
Here you gotta move a mountain in order to get a street closed. So there are some things that are going to be easier.
Sometimes the size of the organization actually means that there's certain things that are easier because they're not seeing they're not controlling every little aspect.
Right.
They're controlling it at a large scale. Here, I think everything is controlled at every aspect, at every scale, pretty uniformly.
Correct.
There's something to do with that, which I'm excited to hear how that works for you as well.
There's also a group of people who run business improvement districts in LA that meet regularly. It's the Los Angeles Bid Consortium. Because we're part of, we have our own city, we've never participated in that. But all of them that are in LA, whether it's the Arts District or the Downtown Districts or Fashion Districts or Westwood Village, they all meet regularly and work together to get things done within the city of Los Angeles. So that group of people is also excited for me to join the team and try and move the needle somewhat on some of those hard issues.
Yeah. So are you going to come in strong on homelessness right away? Or I know you've done a great job here at bringing art to the street in a lot of different ways.
That's big for me, right?
I sure do. And you've done a great job on the promenade. So which are the few things that you want to kind of kick things off with in Hollywood?
So after getting to know the players a little bit, I've got to give myself a little time to get acclimated. But I do know that the councilman who runs the majority of Hollywood, not 100% of it, is also a very his interests align very much with mine on art, theater, homelessness, and so his objectives are also our objectives. Yeah. So I'm going to get in and talk to him right away about alliances, because his voters are the people who are renting those luxury apartments in Hollywood. And they may have a luxury apartment, but if they come downstairs and they're not able to walk 3 doors down to the local Italian restaurant because it's not a great experience,
right,
enhancing that experience helps everybody right now.
That's right.
So again, I feel like there's loads of opportunity for art, for culture, bringing the Pantages down into the middle of the street, and having them do those pop-up performances. And I made that suggestion actually in one of my interviews, and they said, "Oh, there's a union issue." It's like, okay, they do it in New York.
Yeah.
So it can't be that big of an issue.
I find that a lot though with city in general, with the city in general, and the different cities I've worked with, is there's usually a no, you can't do that sort of approach, and a lot of that is the risk aversion culture.
Sure.
In general, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yep.
Taking risks and why sometimes we can't get newer things faster, right. Trying things, harmless things to try, but it's interesting to see how that plays a piece in it, and what we can do to encourage more of that behavior in these different communities, I think is an important aspect to this, because there's, again, understanding why, what creates this risk aversion. What is it legal? The cities are going to get sued.
Right.
It's usually the number one thing, right? Something happened, one person's tripped on a thing, and then...
Or nothing happened, but it might.
Or nothing happened, but it might.
That happens all the time.
So, I think, and this is part of one of the things that I take great interest in, is thinking about the culture of cities.
Yes.
From top down, but also from bottom up. and what is it that people are? How are they acting? How are they motivated? How are they incentivized to innovate? And I guess part of the cool thing about your role is that you get to be in the position of encouraging innovation in different ways, right?
You're exactly right. If you look at downtown Santa Monica's budget, for example, two-thirds of it is our assessments, right? So that's guaranteed money, so to speak. But a third of it we raise. We raise it because we're entrepreneurial.
Right.
And so that is that. And if we're allowed to be more entrepreneurial, or even in municipal government, employees were encouraged to be more entrepreneurial, there would be a whole new dynamic, and that risk would go down because people bought in on the idea in the first place.
Right.
I mean, look at the Miles Playhouse here in
Right.
Santa Monica. Totally an opportunity for entrepreneurial efforts that could completely fund an ambassador program in Green Park instead of it coming out of the general fund.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to Hollywood. I think that there's great opportunity there, and for me, I've got a decade or so more that I want to work, and I feel like this window is just the great crowning moment of my career.
Yeah.
So I'm just thrilled.
It's your capstone.
It is my capstone.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a month off because I'm tired.
Yeah.
But then I'll go in re-energized, hit the ground running.
Amazing. Well, you have a lot to bring to the table.
Thank
I think everyone's excited to see what you create next.
Thank you.
And it's just a super cool thing. You're going from one amazing place to another amazing place.
Yeah. And again, they don't happen by accident. So seeing how you could actually pull the strings to make the biggest impact most economically is something that's really exciting and interesting. And when I'm gone, will you please try and get my farmer's market dinner done, because that's one thing I wish I would have been able to finish here.
Let's see what we can do.
Okay, good.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
For being here and actually me being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. That's really what I should say.
Mi casa es su casa. Anytime.